Hey, what's up, everybody? So, one thing that we really like to look at on my YouTube is rabbit holes. Strange, weird rabbit holes on the internet. And this is one that I've known about for a while, and I've read a little bit up, but I think it's time to go ahead and dive into it. It's from the Paranormal 4chan board, and it's Return to Pelzer. A very strange reskin of Friday the 13th on NES, but it has a lot of elsagate connotations. The reason that I specifically want to cover this is I grew up really close to the aforementioned Pelzer town. So, to dive into this, you gotta have some backstory because there's a lot of stuff you gotta learn. And the main thing to start off with that we need to learn about is the Finders cult. This is a photo of the two men who were arrested in Florida. And I'm about to read the Wikipedia and an old Washington Post article about this. The Finders. The Finders were an international community and a cult founded in Washington, D.C. in the early 1970s by former Air Force Master Sergeant, aka Master of Games, Marion Petty. The movement loosely based its teachings on, among others, the writings of the philosopher Lao Tzu and the spirit of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. They believed in complete passivity when faced with adversity from official authority. 1987 arrest case. It came to wider public attention when the two members of the movement were arrested in Tallahassee, Florida in 1987 and was charged with misdemeanor child abuse of the 6 children accompanying them. The two men having responded with silence when, in a public park, the police inquired as to their identity and relationship to the children. The men were Douglas Ammerman and James Michael Howell, both described as well-dressed men in suits. They used a van to transport 6 scruffy, hungry children of varying ages. The age range of the children was between 2 and 11. The 2 oldest children, referred to as Mary and Max, were interviewed by law enforcement as the others were too young to properly communicate. It was noted that medical examinations of the children showed signs of abuse and malnourishment, as well as bite marks potentially belonging to an adult human. During the interview, as well as eyewitness testimonies from neighbors, it was discovered that the children were raised on a farm belonging to Petty with little adult supervision, with there being 20 adults and 1 other child present. The younger children were observed to display behavior indicating that they were not used to being in a house or using indoor plumbing, requesting to go outside to use the bathroom, or urinating in their pants. Max had a poor concept of time. They explained that they were being weaned from their mothers, and they were rarely allowed inside the house, even sleeping outside. Neighbors observed that the children apparently lived in the farm's watermelon field. Mary described Ammerman and Howell as their teachers, teaching them to read and play games. One game involved disrobing a man, wearing his clothes, and going through his pockets for money, later revising her statement and asserting that only jackets were involved. The 2 reported seeing female members of the cult naked and believed this to be another game as well. When questioned about bad touches, Mary denied SA, but became very fidgety and wanted to end the interview. At another Finders farm in Virginia, agents recorded cages on the premises, with witnesses asserting that they were used to keep children in. The full medical and psychological reports are not available for public viewing as of 2022. According to the U.S. District Court records in Washington, a confidential police source had previously told authorities that the Finders were a cult and conducted brainwashing techniques at a warehouse and a Glover Park duplex, raided by law enforcement. The source told of being recruited by the Finders with a promise of financial reward and sexual gratification. and of being invited by one member to explore Satanism with them. According to the documents, police source said some of the items seized showed pictures of children engaged in what appeared to be cult rituals. Officers of the U.S. Customs Service said that the materials seized included photos showing children involved in bloodletting ceremonies of animals and one photograph of a child in chains. It was noted by a detective during the investigation that documents were discovered with detailed instructions for obtaining children for unspecific purposes, including the impregnation of female members of the community, purchasing, trading, and kidnapping. But neither the documents nor anyone else with knowledge of them could later be found. Robert Gardner Terrell, who owned one of the raided properties, claimed, "We are rational people, not devil worshippers or child molesters, and anything we've done is based on the desire for children to have the richest life they could have." According to Terrell, when recovered photos of naked children were the Howells' own children, and the dead goats shown in the photos mentioned by the Customs Service were already butchered, with the children being taught how to prepare them. The men were released 6 weeks later, with the state of Florida dropping all charges against them. Federal authorities concluded that there was no evidence of criminal activity, with it being noted that although more could have been done for the children, it was difficult to compile accurate information with what knowledge they did have into the lifestyles, only being able to judge subjectively. The authorities contacted the mothers of the children, who came to Tallahassee and retrieved them. So that's just the basics of it. Now let's read this. Washington Post, February 7th, 1987. So this is a archive of the report from when it first happened. Authorities investigating the alleged abuse of 6 children found with 2 men in Tallahassee, Florida park discovered materials yesterday in the Washington area that they say points to a 1960s-style commune called the Finders, described in a court document as a cult that allegedly conducted brainwashing and used children in rituals. D.C. police who searched the Northeast Washington warehouse linked to the group removed a large plastic bags filled with color slides, photographs, and photographic contact sheets. Some photos visible through a bag carried from the warehouse at 307 4th Street Northeast were wallet-sized pictures of children, similar to school photos, and some were of naked children. D.C. police sources said some of these items seized yesterday showed pictures of children engaging in what appeared to be cult rituals. Officers of the U.S. Customs Service, called in to aid in the investigation, said that the material seized yesterday includes photos showing children involved in bloodletting ceremonies of animals and one photograph of a child in chains. So the Wikipedia article is essentially repeating some of this word for word. Custom officials say that they were looking into whether a child operation was being conducted. According to court documents, computers and software were seized from the warehouse, from the Glover Park apartment building, and from a van that was recovered in Tallahassee along with the children. Yesterday's disclosure about the mysterious group grew out of an investigation that was set in motion Wednesday by an anonymous call to Tallahassee police about 2 well-dressed men who were supervising 6 disheveled children in a neighborhood park. The men were arrested and charged with child abuse, according to Tallahassee police. Their links to the D.C. area had led authorities into a far-reaching investigation that includes the Finders, a group of about 40 people that court documents allege is led by a man named Marion Petty and their various homes, including the duplex apartment buildings in Glover Park, the Northeast Washington warehouse, and a 90-acre farm in rural Madison County, Virginia. Tallahassee police who arrested and charged the men identified as Douglas E. Armerman and Michael Hulani with child abuse contacted D.C. police Thursday in an attempt to establish their identities of the children. They learned that DC police had heard of the Finders group, according to Tallahassee spokesperson Scott Hunt. No other member of the group had been located last night, police sources said. According to the U.S. District Court records in Washington, a confidential police source had previously told authorities that the Finders were a cult that conducted brainwashing techniques at their warehouse and the Glover Park duplex at 391820 West Street. The source told of being recruited by the Finders with promise of financial reward, and yeah, it's the same thing that was saying in the Wikipedia article. And of being invited by one of the members to explore Satanism with them. According to the affidavit, the source told authorities that children were used in rituals by members, and though the source had never witnessed abuse of the children, the source said that the children's grandparents feared for their safety. On December 15th, a DC police detective observed a clearing in the rear of the 3900 block. Several round stones had been gathered near a circle, as well as evidence that people had gathered there, according to the document, which states that this practice is sometimes used in satanic rituals. Armed with that information and the report from Tallahassee police of the allegedly abused children, DC police sought search warrants from the Glover Park residence and the warehouse. Meanwhile, authorities in Florida attempted to learn more about the 6 small children, described by a police spokesman as hungry and pretty pathetic, who had set the investigation in motion. The children, identified in a court document only by the first names of Honeybee, John, Franklin, BB, Max, and Mary, were described as dirty, unkempt, hungry, disturbed, and agitated. They had been living in the rear of the van for some time, the document said. Yesterday, police spokesman Hunt said one of the children, a 6-year-old girl, showed signs of SA, but that an examination by local doctors showed none of the children as being ill. 5 of the children were uncommunicative, according to the police, and none seemed to recognize objects such as typewriters and staplers. However, the oldest was able to give investigators some information. She said that the 2 men were her teachers, according to Hunt. She was not sure where they had been recently or where they were going, but until recently they had been living in the district in a house with other children and adults. They lived mainly on a diet of raw fruits and vegetables, she said. The girl told police that while they were in the district, the children received instructions from a man they called a game caller or game leader, according to Hunt. All this weird game stuff. So strange. According to the DC court document, a Tallahassee police investigator identified this man as Marion Petty, who the confidential police source also identified as the stroller leader of this cult. The children have been placed in emergency shelters in Tallahassee, according to Merrill Moody of the Florida Department of Health and Rehabilitation Services. He said officials were trying to identify them. Neighbors of the W Street house last night identified the photographs of 2 of the children as residents of the home. Before their arrest in the park, Abraham and Hulalan had told the police that they were teachers from Washington transporting these children to Mexico and a school for brilliant children. According to Hunt, when police asked the men where the children's mothers were, they said they were being weaned from their mothers. Yesterday, U.S. Attorney Joseph E. DeGenova said that authorities are investigating the crime of kidnapping, but that the investigation is not limited to that as the evidence evolves. George Winowski, spokesman for the FBI in Jacksonville, said the FBI was checking the transportation of children across state lines for immoral purposes or kidnapping. Authorities in Florida who searched the van found 20 floppy computer disks and a device Hunt said could be used to hook into a computer in another location by telephone. A modem? A modem. Okay. 20 floppy computer disks and a device Hunt said could be used to hook into a computer into another location by telephone. He said DC police have obtained evidence that a computer linked to the group received a call from Tallahassee late this week. Meanwhile, authorities in Washington were busy searching the warehouse at the Glover Park residence, side by side brick apartment buildings that, according to the neighbors, stood out in the neighborhood because of the hot tub and a satellite dish on the roof. Only women and children lived there, though men visited regularly, according to the neighbors. One woman from the neighborhood said the children from the house were easy to spot because they were so dirty, adding that adults with them seemed not to care. She said the group from the house reminded her of leftover hippies. But another neighbor, college professor John Matthews, who said he had lived at 3918 West Street for a short time while looking for an apartment, said the residents were a close-knit group of feminists who liked to help people and were not a cult. The neighborhood talks about them because of their lifestyle, Matthews said. 4th Street warehouse, which authorities said also was used as a residence, had windows that were boarded shut. One wall was covered with a huge map of the world, lit by floodlights. Upstairs, mattresses were flung on the floors of the various rooms. Staff writes Joseph E. Blanchard. Oh, staff writers. Wheeler contributed to this report. That's all, right? That's it. So, yeah. That's the Finders cult. And allegedly, this return to Pelzer might have something to do with the Finders cult. And it might. Because I honestly remember when I was young, being at the park in Pelzer and seeing a bunch of weird little dirty kids. It was just one time I remember it when I was a child. There was a bunch of strange, weird little dirty, unkempt kids who could barely talk at the park in Pelzer. So, I don't know. This is a deep one. This is some straight True Detective deep rabbit hole that we're gonna dive into. Thanks for watching this, and stay tuned for more updates on this one.